The clang of metal on metal echoed across the ruined manufactorum like a heartbeat of a corpse, relentless and hollow. I had thought the planet's desolation was complete when I first set foot on Typho 7, but the silence was deceptive. Every corridor, every vaulted chamber hummed with a tension I could not name, as if the very air itself was aware of my trespass. My boots scuffed against broken girders and pools of blackened oil, and every step brought a new uncertainty. Was that movement in the corner of my vision real, or just the play of shadows across a shattered floor? My Vox grill crackled once, a useless stutter that offered no comfort, and I realized that I had left the rest of my squad behind hours ago. The fog of abandonment had swallowed them whole, leaving me alone with the machinery and the whispers that the wind or the emptiness carried. I found myself drawn toward the center of the manufactorum, where a great Prometheum furnace had collapsed, its skeletal framework jutting into the sky like the ribs of a dead leviathan. Here the cold was absolute and the silence oppressive. I ran my fingers over the control panels half buried under debris, noting the sigils of the Adeptus Mechanicus, worn but still solemn. Servitors, long dead, lay scattered in grotesque positions, their augmetic limbs twitching faintly in the draft. Or perhaps it was just my imagination. That was when I first sensed it, a shift in the rhythm of the shadows. They moved differently here, slithering across the walls and pooling at the edges of my vision, not like a trick of light, but like something alive, calculating. I froze, breath shallow, hearing my heartbeat loud enough to rival the distant hum of machinery. The tales of Genestealer cults had always seemed like warnings for those too credulous, stories to frighten cadets into obedience. And yet here in the half-lit ruins, every instinct screamed that they were no myth. The hybrids, their claws hidden beneath ragged uniforms or human guise, could be anywhere. The first clue was subtle. A smear of blood too small to be noticed on the floor, a pattern of wear on a stair tread that suggested weight not human. My mind catalogued every anomaly, trying to impose logic on a creeping dread. But logic was a fragile weapon here. Every shadow could be a lie, every echo a trap. A soft hiss broke the stillness somewhere above me, and I looked up just in time to see the glint of a claw against the broken girders. It was over in an instant, a blur of sinew and movement that vanished before I could even draw my last pistol. I staggered back, heart hammering against my chest, tasting the acrid tang of fear mixed with the ever-present scent of rust and decay. I thought of my training, of the doctrines drilled into me, but training was meaningless against something that did not think like a human, that could anticipate and manipulate in ways no strategy could counter. I realized then that survival here would not be won by firepower alone. It required vigilance beyond what any mind could sustain. Every corner I turned revealed more signs, symbols carved into walls, almost imperceptible glyphs that seemed to crawl beneath the surface of my sight. Discarded tools arranged in unnatural patterns, the faintest scent of something sweet and coppery in the air like blood warmed by heat I could not feel. It dawned on me with a chilling clarity that I was being watched, studied, and perhaps even guided into this maze. The hybrids did not need to strike immediately. Patience was their weapon. The longer I lingered, the more the paranoia became a tangible shroud, wrapping around my thoughts, pulling me deeper into the manufactorum's labyrinth. I found a chamber that had once served as a reliquary for the tech priest's minor icons. Broken statuettes of the Omnissiah littered the floor, and in the center, a pool of stagnant fluid reflected the dim light in strange, writhing shapes. There I saw my first Genestealer, though I did not recognize it as such at the time. Its eyes, unnervingly human yet wrong, peered from the shadows, It did not move, and I dared not either, frozen by the horror of recognition before the mind could even label it. The creature tilted its head slightly, almost curiously, as if aware of my thoughts, weighing them against some ineffable standard. And then, without warning, it was gone, leaving only a faint disturbance in the air. A whisper that may have been a breath or a promise of violence yet to come. I stumbled back into the main corridor, trying to force my mind to rationalize, to frame the encounter as hallucination. But the scratches along the walls, the impossible reach of shadows, the faint hum beneath the floor plates all confirmed the truth I had not wanted to acknowledge. The Genestealers were already here, and they had been watching long before I arrived. Every instinct screamed that the manufactorum itself was alive and its pulse was not human. I was alone, yes, but never unobserved. And somewhere in the distance, through the twisting halls and collapsing catwalks, the whisper of claws over steel promised that the night was far from over. I forced myself forward, each step measured, careful not to announce my presence. The corridors twisted unpredictably, a labyrinth fashioned by decades of neglect, collapse, and perhaps deliberate sabotage. Pipes hung like the entrails of some great machine beast, dripping acidic sludge that hissed as it struck the promethium-stained floors. Every sound I made echoed unnaturally, bouncing from wall to wall, creating phantoms of noise that seemed to dance ahead of me, and yet I could not stop. Something deeper than fear, curiosity, stubbornness, or sheer survival instinct propelled me further into the manufactorum's heart. It was there I found the first traces of the cult's handiwork. A small chamber, nearly invisible behind a collapsed support beam, contained the telltale signs, footprints half hidden in ash, symbols etched in the floor with a precision that suggested ritual rather than accident, and the faintest scent of incense tinged with blood. My stomach churned as I realized the level of sophistication, the patience of a creature that understood not just violence but manipulation. Each mark was designed to provoke, to disorient, to draw intruders deeper into the web. My hand tightened around the grip of my last pistol, though I knew it would be of little use if the creatures attacked as one. I crouched low, scanning the room, my mind racing to piece together the implications. The cult did not move randomly. It moved with purpose, embedding its influence in every crevice of the structure. Families once loyal to the Emperor, workers of the manufactorum, may have been subverted long before the planet's abandonment. The realization settled like a weight in my chest. The Genestealers were not merely predators. They were architects of terror, patient and intelligent, their actions echoing across time to manipulate the living into tools of their will. The very air seemed thick with expectation, each shadow potentially concealing the next strike. As I pressed onward, I stumbled into a corridor partially blocked by a fallen scaffold. The smell hit me first, something pungent, metallic and familiar. Blood, not just human, but other, mutated. I froze, straining to discern the source, and then I saw it, the telltale gleam of inhuman eyes reflecting the pale light from above. The figure was crouched low, limbs folded unnaturally, every muscle coiled as if ready to spring. I could see the hybrid traits, the elongated fingers tipped with fine claws, the faint ridges along the skull, the unnatural fluidity of movement. And yet it held a human expression or a distorted parody of one watching me, judging, calculating. A hiss escaped my lips before I could stop it, and the creature's head jerked toward me with unnatural speed. I raised my last pistol, but instinct and terror collided. It was fast, impossibly fast. For a heartbeat I thought I had been discovered, yet it did not attack. Instead, it tilted its head once more and vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only the memory of its gaze, sharp and intimate, as if it had looked into my very soul. I staggered back, trying to comprehend what I had just witnessed. This was no ordinary encounter. The hybrids were not merely hunting. They were probing, learning, shaping my fear, bending the environment to their advantage. I pressed on, compelled by a mix of dread and the need to survive. Every step deeper revealed more of the horror the planet had nurtured. Chambers filled with remnants of aborted rituals, the remains of those who had failed to resist, and signs of systemic infection that suggested the Genestealers' reach extended far beyond the manufactorum itself. I realized then that the infestation was not merely physical, it was ideological, spiritual even. The hybrids were the seed of corruption, embedding themselves in the structure of human society with a patience that mocked the Imperium's bureaucracy and discipline. In one chamber, I discovered what I first thought were corpses of laborers, their faces frozen in expressions of abject terror. But the more I looked, the more I saw the subtle signs: elongated limbs, faint ridges on the skull, eyes that reflected a strange intelligence. They were hybrids, victims and conspirators alike, caught between worlds. And yet, even in their twisted forms, a shred of humanity clung stubbornly, as if the Emperor's light had not been fully extinguished. The paradox was grotesque. Horror and devotion intertwined, a living testament to the Genestealers' cunning. By the time I reached the upper levels of the manufactorum, I was breathing heavily, every muscle taut, senses screaming warnings I could barely parse. The shadows no longer merely concealed, they breathed, pulsed, as if alive. I understood then that the true danger was not only what I could see but what I could not. The Genestealers' patience was infinite. They did not need to strike immediately. Each hesitation, each choice I made, was already mapped, analyzed, and turned against me. I realized with a cold certainty that I was not simply walking through a ruin. I was walking through their hunting ground, crafted meticulously to train, test, and ultimately consume anyone foolish enough to enter. Hours, or perhaps only minutes, passed in the oppressive twilight of the upper manufactorum. Time had lost meaning here, dissolved into the rhythm of my labored breathing and the shifting shadows that haunted every corner. I moved cautiously along the catwalks, the metal groaning under my weight, knowing that the slightest misstep could announce my presence to whatever waited below. The Genestealers were patient. They did not rush. They did not need to. The slow drip of promethium, the distant clatter of falling debris, each sound was part of their design, shaping my reactions, bending me toward exhaustion and fear. I came upon a chamber that had once been a control hub for the factory's energy conduits. Consoles blinked weakly, their data slates corroded beyond utility. Yet the eerie glow illuminated scratches in the floor, footprints too large to be human, claw marks embedded in the metal. And then I saw it. A figure, barely perceptible, perched atop a ruined console. Its eyes glimmered with a strange, deliberate intelligence, observing me as if weighing whether I was prey, pawn, or potential tool. The creature did not move, yet I could feel its awareness pressing against my consciousness, a silent force that was at once alien and intimately invasive. I froze. The air seemed to thicken around me, laden with the scent of decay, oil, and something sweeter, something that hinted at life forcibly drawn into the hybrid's grasp. My fingers tightened around the grip of my last pistol, knuckles white, but instinct told me that brute force would not save me here. I had to survive by wit, by patience, by understanding the patterns woven into this place by creatures whose very existence defied the Emperor's logic. The shadow above tilted its head, a gesture almost human, almost mocking. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone, slipping through the broken conduits like smoke, leaving me alone once more with my racing thoughts. I descended deeper into the manufactorum, each step a study in vigilance. The air grew colder, heavier, as though the building itself exhaled a mournful breath. I passed corridors littered with remnants of workers' lives, tools abandoned mid-task, data slates cracked open to reveal cryptic logs, and the occasional corpse twisted in ways that suggested both horror and devotion. The hybrids had shaped this place into a crucible, where fear and devotion were inseparable. I realized then that any who entered were already participants in a ritual they did not understand, pawns in a game whose rules were incomprehensible. A distant rumble echoed through the steel, and I paused, listening. The sound resonated like a heartbeat, slow but inexorable, reverberating through my bones. Somewhere in the distance, deeper than I could reach, the Genestealer brood was moving, and with them, the latent power of the infestation spread further into Typhos 7. I understood the scope of what I faced. This was not a single creature or even a single cult, but an entire system of corruption, patient, methodical, and terrifyingly intelligent. To survive would not mean defeating them. It would mean enduring long enough to escape, and even that might be impossible. I pressed forward, emerging at last into a vast chamber where the remnants of the factory's furnaces rose like the skeletons of titans. Steam hissed from broken pipes, and the glow of residual promethium reflected off metal surfaces in fractured patterns, creating phantoms of movement that made my mind reel. And then I saw them, a pair of hybrids smaller and younger than the one I had glimpsed before. Their eyes fixed on me with a curiosity that made my skin crawl. One tilted its head, exposing elongated teeth in a grin that was neither human nor entirely beast. I knew instinctively that this encounter was a test, a measure of my fear and resolve. I took a slow step back, careful not to break the invisible line the creatures had drawn. Their eyes followed, unblinking, patient, and I felt the cold weight of inevitability pressing down. Somewhere deep in the manufactorum, other eyes watched, other claws waited, and I realized that my journey had only just begun. The night was far from over, and the shadow of the Genestealers stretched across every corner of the planet, patiently, inexorably, and with a precision that mocked the limits of human perception. And yet, despite the fear, despite the suffocating dread, a spark of determination lingered. I was alone, yes, but not yet claimed. My survival depended on understanding the patterns of the hunt, on reading the signs left in shadow and blood, and on facing horrors that defied comprehension. Beyond this chamber, deeper into Typhos 7, the stakes would rise, the revelations grow darker, and the true scale of the Genestealer infestation would unfold in ways I could scarcely imagine. The corridors twisted ahead, dark and infinite, and I stepped forward, knowing that each heartbeat carried me closer to discovery, and to the next chapter of the nightmare. The sky above Typhos 7 was a bruised canvas of ash and storm clouds, fractured by the occasional flare of promethium fires that still burned in the lower industrial zones. from orbit, the planet appeared lifeless, a decaying jewel of metal and stone. Yet the sensors of the Astra Militarum told a different story. Subtle energy signatures, flickers of psychic resonance, and traces of movement too deliberate to be natural. Governor Selkirk of the Planetary Administration had reported unusual disappearances among factory workers and minor nobles alike, dismissing some as accidents, others as acts of sabotage. Yet the subtle pattern that unfolded in his reports, unnoticed and unheeded, hinted at something far more sinister. Typhus 7 was already infected, and the true nature of the contagion remained hidden behind the polite veneer of bureaucracy and misjudged caution. Colonel Wraith of the 21st Armageddon Regiment had been dispatched with a single company, far too few for a planet of this size. Yet the chain of command believed that intimidation and discipline might suffice. From the landing pad atop the ruined manufactorum, he surveyed the cityscape below. Every spire and hab block a potential nest, every shadow a potential threat. "Containment is not an option," his aide whispered, voice trembling under the weight of the unspoken truth. The hybrids did not simply attack, they whispered, infiltrated, coiled their influence around unsuspecting minds until loyalty itself became a weapon against the Imperium. Wraith understood this instinctively, yet he was trapped within the limits of human strategy, bound by the slow gears of bureaucratic orders and the hope that discipline alone could restore order. The first contact came not with a scream, but with subtle disruption. Communications failed in the lower industrial zones, box grills producing static that seemed almost sentient, rising and falling in patterns that mimicked human speech before collapsing into nothing. Patrols reported visions of movement in abandoned factories, shadows that were always just beyond the edge of perception. Workers frozen mid-task as though waiting for some silent cue. A psychic screening of local populations revealed faint, irregular fluctuations, fleeting glimpses of a shared consciousness that defied explanation. The brood, as the whispered reports called them, were more than mere beasts. They were architects of influence, their presence seeping into the very fabric of planetary life. Wraith moved his company through the ruins with meticulous care, each corridor and hab block swept in careful formation. The soldiers were disciplined, yet even they felt the weight of invisible eyes. One by one, they reported fleeting glimpses of forms that appeared human, yet unnaturally elongated, their gestures precise, measured, almost deliberate. Each time the shadows receded before any confrontation could occur, leaving only doubt, fear, and the realization that the enemy did not need to strike to be lethal. The brood shaped the battlefield in subtle ways, eroding morale, manipulating perception, and guiding human thought toward despair. Within the industrial sectors, whispers of cult activity grew. Minor officials were discovered performing rituals in service of unknown entities, their loyalty to the Emperor fractured by the subtle influence of hybrid leaders. Families of the infected showed extraordinary devotion to their hidden masters, performing acts that seemed to contradict their previous beliefs. The Genestealer cult operated not in the open but as a living network of manipulation, embedding itself in the hierarchy of Typhus 7 like a cancer, spreading invisible tendrils through every layer of society. Wraith's attempts to purge suspected areas met with limited success. The hybrids melted into shadows, leaving human proxies behind to obfuscate the truth. Reports of missing personnel became daily occurrences, each disappearance carefully orchestrated. Some were overt, Workers vanishing from factories, soldiers failing to return from patrols, but others were subtler. Mental collapse, inexplicable accidents, sudden illness. Each loss was catalogued by Wraith, yet the pattern eluded him. He knew that the enemy's patience dwarfed his own. The Brood had time in a way the Imperium rarely afforded its defenders. Every failed sweep, every misstep, only deepened the hybrid's advantage. And the soldiers began to speak of whispers in the night, of shadows that mimicked voices, of fleeting shapes that vanished when approached. Fear, they realized, could be weaponized. Yet the Imperium soldiers pressed on, each step heavy with uncertainty and dread. Their formation, their doctrine, and their faith in the Emperor were tested against an enemy whose very existence defied their understanding. Even the tech priests accompanying the regiment noted anomalies. Servo skulls that failed to respond, augmetics twitching without command, data slates overwritten by symbols that were not human-made. The Brood's influence extended even into the realm of machines, bending the material as subtly as it bent the minds of men. Typho 7 was a crucible, and the soldiers were its unwitting participants. Night fell over the manufacturum sectors, and with it came the unrelenting pressure of unseen eyes. The shadows deepened, and somewhere beyond the flickering light of lost torches, a whisper passed from one hybrid to another. A command carried not by sound, but by cognition. The Brood moved as one, yet remained invisible, a network of instinct and intelligence that rendered human coordination nearly useless. Colonel Wraith, despite his experience, felt the weight of inevitability pressing down. Containment might already have failed. The war he fought was not only physical but psychological, and each decision could echo across the population in ways he could not predict. And yet, even in this creeping despair, a spark of resolve endured. The soldiers of the Astra Militarum were trained to persevere, to fight against impossible odds. They would not surrender easily, nor would the Imperium's gaze waver. But the Brood's whispers had already taken root. Every corridor, every hab block, every shadow held the potential for corruption. Typhus 7 was no longer merely a battlefield. It was a living testament to the Genestealers' patient cruelty, and the night had only just begun to reveal its horrors.